Will they give link or no? Hmm? Greetings from Chicago. I'm Sam Petroda, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you all as part of the Unacademy and Genius platform organized by Times of India. I know that we have several young people listening to this conversation, and I believe most of you were born after most of my work in India was completed in 1990. You may not know about my background, so I thought it would be good to share with you a little bit of my journey to let you know that if I can do it, you can do it 10 times better. You are lucky to be living in one of the most exciting period in human history. In the last 50 years, longevity has increased, infant mortality has decreased, education has expanded, poverty has been reduced, and technology has really made a huge difference in communication, energy, transport, and overall comfort. Today, you are lucky to be enjoying the fruits of a lot of work that was done in the past by many pioneers from all over the world. The key has been science and technology. I believe without science and scientists, there is no future. I have great confidence in human ability to solve problems. And I believe going forward, your generation will enjoy lots and lots of fruits of work that has been done in the last 50 years on IT, biotech, nanotech, materials, genetics, and so many other things. The pace at which technology is moving today is phenomenal. Just in last 20 years, we have lifted close to a few hundred million people, I would say 300-400 in India and 700-800 million in China. However, population has been constantly increasing, and the challenges will continue to be faced. And I believe technology will continue to find solutions. So the purpose today is to talk a little bit about what is next for India's telecom industry. So if I begin my journey, I must start with the fact that I was born and raised in a small little tribal village in Orissa, a place called Titilagarh, in 1942. So I'm 78 years old. And I have lived through very interesting and exciting life. My highs have been very high, and my lows have been very low. In Orissa, My parents came from Gujarat looking for work in 30s. My father had fourth grade education. And I remember when I was born, my father's salary was 20 rupees a month, which is just about 27 cents in today's exchange rate. Being Gujarati, the only connection we had with Gujarat from Orissa was Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel. And those were the days of independence movement. I was born in British Raj. There was a lot of excitement all over for India to be free. And that excitement rubbed over in our childhood experiences. I was sent to boarding school with my brother in Gujarat, in Gandhian school at Sardar Patel's village near Karamsad. And I, along with my brother, studied and went into formal schooling at the age of 9 in fifth grade. Two of us, he was 12, I was 9, lived by ourselves and in the process learned a great deal about Gandhian values right at the boarding school. Discipline, get up early in the morning, do your exercise, have your breakfast, study, prayers, all kinds of little rituals made up our day. Studied there for 5 years, and that gave us grounding into fundamental values which are important in life, like truth, trust, love, inclusion, because there are all kinds of people in the dormitory, diversity. They were rich, they were poor, there are people from villages, there are people from cities. And all these things mattered as we started our journey forward into college, business, family life, and so on and so forth. Then after 5 years, decided to go to Baroda, a bigger city, went to university there, got a degree in physics, got a master's in physics. I was the first one to graduate from college in my family. We are 8 brothers and sisters, 5 sisters, 3 brothers. And while in Orissa, growing up, we lived in an environment where we were one family right in front of us was a Muslim family. Next to it was a Marwari family. There was a Sardar family. And there was in the back of our house was an Oriya family. We all lived in harmony as part of one community. We all celebrated together, played together, sang together, and there was no one ever thought of that someone is Muslim, someone is Hindu, someone is Sikh. And when I see all these things coming up in India today, I worry a great deal. India is a land of diversity. India is a land of inclusion. And for Indians to really start dividing people, it just doesn't make sense to me. So in college, I had experiences of different type. Studied physics, mathematics, and one fine day I read in the newspaper that President Kennedy has decided to send man onto the moon. So I decided to come to America. That was 1964. I took a boat from Mumbai to Karachi, to Aden, to Egypt, to Italy, took a train from Italy to London, and took a plane from London to New York, and took a bus from New York to Chicago, and landed up in a cold winter with lots of snow. for someone from a little village in Orissa who had never seen snow, never been to five-star hotel, never used telephone in life. It was quite a journey. But in the process, I learned a lot. I learned how to use fork and knife. I learned table manners. And every process was a learning process. And I realized that the life is full of lifelong learnings. Came to America, studied electrical engineering for a year, and then got into business of digital switching. Again, these were early days of digital switching. Worked on lots and lots of interesting technologies in those days. There were no microprocessors. There was no higher level language. We did programming in machine learning or machine language. And when first 4-bit microprocessor from Intel came out, we were all so excited about the future of processing. Today, this processing element or that level of processing element is everywhere. The invention of transistor in 1947 changed the face of human history. It is because of transistor that we have been able to achieve so much in technology. I spent 10 years, about 8 years in the telecom company that I had joined. Then I started my own business in Chicago to develop digital switching systems along with two colleagues, build a business, sold a business to Rockwell International in 1979 for about $50 million in those days, and then turned my attention to India. I came to India to take my parents to see Taj Mahal and realize in the process that phones don't work. It used to take 10 years to get a telephone connection. Then we had less than 2 million phones for 650 million people. So I decided to devote next 10 years of my life in fixing India's telephones. I gave a presentation to Indira Gandhi. Then Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, and I had an opportunity to work with him very closely. As first chairman of the Telecom Commission, I worked on technology missions with him. In the process, learned a lot about India, Indian government, set up CDOT, Center for Development of Telematics, worked at Center for Development of Advanced Computing, and ultimately worked with Rajiv Gandhi on 6 technology missions. Rajiv Gandhi gave me political will and support required to get things done. When many of the politicians today say that nothing got done in India for 60, 70 years, they basically lie. And they can get away with that kind of a lie. India has accomplished so much in the last 70 years. I'm an example of what India accomplished. Where could you get a master's in physics for $10, $15 of tuition? Where could you get to go to college for almost free? India has done so much in atomic energy, space, aeronautics, in agriculture, green revolution, milk revolution. But misinformation apparently gets a lot of attention. And those who lie have no shame. Basically, what they are saying is, people of India, lived without any accomplishments for 50 years, which is not true. So India did do a lot, but we could have done a lot more. But we collectively decided that we will focus on democracy, freedom, human rights, and in the beginnings, some level of control economy because we didn't have any strength. We were essentially robbed. So at independence, we had very little of institutions and infrastructure. Our founding fathers had to work very hard to build IITs, IIMs, dams, steel mills, and these kinds of things take 30, 40 years. And that's what we did. We build institutions, we build human resource. Today, Indians are all over the world in corporate sector, business sector, academics, research, mainly because our founding fathers spent a lot of time in building right institutions. So I got to work with Rajiv Gandhi on technology missions related to drinking water, immunization, cooking oil, literacy, telecom, with Dr. Kurian on milk production and milk revolution. And those were the best days of my life. It was romantic. We were solving large national challenges. Not that we had all the answers, but we had the excitement, energy, enthusiasm. Then we decided to produce polio vaccine in 1987-88. Because of that, 25 years down the road, we could eradicate polio altogether from India. No one talks about it. Because of what we did then, today in telecom, as opposed to 2 million phones, we have 1.2 billion phones. We generate $115 billion worth of software export every year, year after year. We are the largest producer of milk. List of accomplishment is huge. Nobody wants to look at it because this requires deep understanding of what it takes to develop a nation. Then we had a lot of support from young engineers like you all. We could succeed in telecom because young talent in India had the core competence required to build products and services India needed. So we focused on indigenous development, rural telecom, most sophisticated software C++ in 1985. And in the process trained thousands and thousands of people in telecom and IT. Things don't happen overnight. Today, private industry can come and hire 500 software people because then we trained 500 software people who multiplied into 5,000, multiplied into 50,000 and 500,000. We really planted seeds for development in India then. Unfortunately, this romance didn't last too long. Rajiv Gandhi got killed in 1990. I had a heart attack, quadruple bypass, and I decided to come back to US to take care of my family. But by then I had given up US nationality. I was Indian citizen, came as a tourist, started my life again. But then I had a patent on electronic diaries. First handheld computer, so-called PDA, then became mobile phone. I had the first patent in 1975. So I sued in Cook County Court. Hewlett Packard, Texas Instrument, Radio Shack, Toshiba, Sharp, Casio, got some money, used that to build my life again. And then started WorldTel, a telecom bank to improve telecom in developing world with United Nations. Then finally, when Dr. Manmohan Singh became Prime Minister, I decided to come back to India to work on National Knowledge Commission, Innovation Council, and Digital India. In the second inning, I had all the support and political will from Dr. Manmohan Singh. In the process, I got to work on a variety of things: modernization of Indian railways, smart grid task force, public broadcasting system, radio and TV, and e-governance. And again, that was also a very interesting and challenging period of my life. When Manmohan Singh government lost in 2014, I again decided to come back to Chicago to put my life in order. Now I work on several startups, non-profit organizations. In the process of last 55 years that I have been in Chicago, I started several small companies, sold companies, because I also have to live and survive and feed my family. But throughout this journey, I focused on fundamental values that I had learned from Gandhiji's life. To me, his life was the message. And I'm a firm believer in Gandhian values, thoughts. So while I worked in high tech, I decided that my feet has to be grounded in Indian reality, in Indian ethos, in Indian values. And I must say, I had the most interesting journey anyone could hope to have. In the process, I had two quadruple bypasses. I had cancer, but I survived, did well. I had support of the family, love and affection from my friends, and just about enough money to live comfortably. Making money did not impress me at all or interest me. I wanted a journey which was fulfilling, exciting, challenging. I wanted to make sure that I use my creativity to do different things and not get stuck in one vertical. And I believe I had that to some extent. So now I want to talk about some of the lessons which are worth sharing with friends. To begin with, I would say there is no substitute for good character, values, and hard work. I find in this day and age, people believe in making quick buck, taking shortcuts, lying, cheating to grab power. And they think they are smart. They think they are clever. And people respect that apparently. Very few people with values get respected. What does character mean? To me, character implies honesty, right moral standards, ethics. What do values mean? Believe in democracy. To me, believe in human rights, freedom, love, diversity, inclusion, logic, rationale, respect for other human being, and hard work. There is no substitute for hard work. Many times people say you are lucky, not to me, but to others. But the point is they don't realize that harder you work, luckier you get. If you're lazy, you can't be lucky. So to me, education defines you. I'm a son of a carpenter. As soon as I got into telecom and IT, my caste got wiped out. I became telecom expert, innovator. So education is always the key to defining you. Who are you? Are you a doctor? Are you an engineer? Are you a scientist? Are you an economist? Are you a lawyer? And you acquire new caste. But education is also empowering. It's also energizing if you use it right. Other things that define you as a person is how you operate, discipline. Most of the time in people in India, I find, don't mean what they say and they don't say what they mean. They have split level consciousness. They say one thing and do exactly opposite. And they are considered smart. Discipline is very important. When you say somebody that you will do this, you have to deliver. Because then in the back of it is goes discipline. That someone can rely on you. You need, in this day and age, analytical abilities to be able to analyze situation. You need to be able to create something out of it. So your creativity. But the most important thing is respect for other human being. Other people's ideas are important. When I see debate on Indian television, arguing with each other, shooting with all kinds of allegations, it's just not respectful. But apparently it sells. It's a great drama. People love it. You got to respect other people's view. You got to have ethical standards, moral standards. You got to have concern and commitment for other people. But you got to have courage to stand up for what is right and what is wrong. And you got to exhibit leadership. Leadership in business, leadership in social sector, leadership at home, leadership in community. Leadership is not just about politics. Leadership is required in religion. Leadership is required in small little community someplace. But to be able to operate in a society, you got to respect democratic values, freedom. And you got to be able to exhibit empathy, not just sympathy. You got to put yourself in other people's shoes to be able to see how they feel, what they feel, what their needs are. Unfortunately, our system is designed in such a way that these leaders have all the answers. They are incompetent. Some of them have very little education. They lie. They cheat. And at the end of the day, they affect society. They lead you into wrong path. By the time you find that out, sometimes it's too late. So leadership is at every level critical. You got to be open. I come from IT background. Information technology to me brings about openness, accessibility, connectivity, networking, democratization, decentralization, accountability, and as a result, social transformation. So to me, these are some important issues. I hope this gives you an idea of my journey, which started in a small little tribal village in Orissa, landed up in America, where I have spent 55 years. In between, took me to India for gaps of decade, 2 decades, 1 decade with Rajiv Gandhi, and another decade with Dr. Manmohan Singh. It has been a wonderful journey. At a personal level, I had a girlfriend in college. She came to America. We got married. I've been married for almost 54 years. I have two wonderful children. One went to MIT and Harvard. He's a venture capitalist in California. I have a daughter who went to Michigan and London Business School, and she makes movies in Hollywood. I have two great grandchildren. So my life has been very fulfilling. And I'm sure you all can live that kind of life. You have better tools, you have better environment. The key is what you value. How do you structure your life? Do you look for quick gains or you lay out a long term path with characters, with honesty, hard work, and live in peace and harmony with everybody? So I believe there are many questions that people have asked. I've been given a list of questions based on what you all have asked. So first question is, what is the future of Indian telecom? I believe telecom has done extremely well in India. As I said earlier, when I started telecom journey in India, we had 2 million phones. Today we have 1.2 billion phones. India is essentially connected. But at the same time, there are huge challenges. Connectivity is really not distributed properly. Many parts of rural India are still not connected. Poor people still don't have broadband. So today, according to me, there is a huge crisis in education. And I'm going to talk more about it later on, not today, but in some other public forums. On one hand, we have an education policy. On the other hand, we have a very serious education crisis because of lack of connectivity. We are trying to offer digital education, but we are not prepared. Country is not prepared. Only 20 to 30% of the people have access to the kind of broadband you need for digital education. We have no content. We have not trained our teachers to be mentors, and we can't deliver digital education today. But we want people to pay full tuition. Why should anybody pay tuition if you can't deliver what you're supposed to deliver? So there is a huge crisis, partly because of the way telecom is structured. But overall, telecom has done well. The next big challenge is to use telecom to improve education, health, governance, productivity, efficiency, security, business, banking. The application of telecom is going to be a bigger challenge now. In the process, you'll have to upgrade infrastructure, provide better access, higher bandwidth, lower cost, better devices. So I think telecom is on its way. The real challenge is education, health, and we have serious crisis in both of these areas. And we are hiding it under the rug. Education is the next big crisis looming all over. And we'll talk about that later on. What were the challenges that you faced in initial years of your career? Basically, I needed inner strength. I needed comfortable self that I could respect, had good self-esteem. So if somebody said, look, you don't know this, don't get upset. I remember once my boss in America said that you don't know how to write good English. And I accepted that. And I spent 6 months on my own, almost 7, 8 hours a day after work to improve my English writing. I didn't take that criticism as negative. I thought that was a very valid criticism. So to be able to take criticism, respect other people's viewpoint was a very important thing in my life. And there was resistance all along on the way. Everybody wants to do standard things. Nobody wants to do different things. And I always had laid out a path to do different things. So when I left my cushy job as the head of digital switching at Rockwell International, where I had my own corporate jet, I had 3 offices in Dallas, Chicago, Cedar Rapids. It was a big decision. And family and friends said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Because right from that high, I went down with zero salary in India, no connections, no capabilities. Build it up, then again came back to US, where I had lost all my connections. So I think courage is another thing that I had to learn. How did engineer play a key role in India's telecom transformation? I think engineering is very fundamental to all big infrastructures, whether it is power, water, sanitation, or telecom. But then I had to think beyond bits and bytes. I had to think of policies, infrastructures, people. Like when I became chairman of Telecom Commission at the age of, you know, 40 or so, I had 550,000 employees in telecom. We had close to 27 unions. It had nothing to do with engineering and telecom, but it had to do with human resource. You have to understand people. You have to understand institutions, policies, governance structures. But engineering gives you that ability to understand big complex systems. How the decade of innovation panned out. In Rajiv Gandhi, in Manmohan Singh's time, we had a decade of innovation announced, 2010 to 2020. Unfortunately, when Modi government came to power in 2014, they abolished the National Innovation Council. I believe that was a big mistake. I told government of Mr. Modi that it's okay for you to have your own people, but innovation is an important element. But innovation requires thinking differently. Innovation was not part of their agenda. So first thing they did is abolished National Innovation Council. I was very disappointed. So we could only do it for 4 years. It is for you to see the record as to what we did on clusters, on innovations. We used to have once a year big seminar with almost 30, 40 countries head of innovations, and we learned a lot in the process. We started you know encouraging people on startup. The startup village in Kerala is an example of what Innovation Council contributed. And I think today a lot of young people want to go into their own entrepreneurship. Is an example of what we started then, and the message of innovation. And innovation is not just in IT and telecom and technology. We need innovations in government, in health sector, in education, in railways, in post office. And that was the message. We tried to convey that innovation is a platform. So there are other questions, I believe, coming up, you know, and I can probably see if I can read some of these. Oh, no, I missed these questions. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. So from first, yeah, there are some more questions. Yeah. What were the challenges faced during the mission to interconnect all education research institutions? Thank you for asking this question. We built a national knowledge network at the cost of about $3 or $4 billion. It was one of the most interesting projects during Manmohan Singh's time for IT people. We took 1,100 nodes to connect all our universities, libraries, and R&D institutions on big gigabyte fiber optics network. The idea was to connect all our universities and research institutions for them to be able to conduct research and also connect them to US, Europe, Japan, and other parts of the world. This was done very quietly, and that network is already operational. You can go Google National Knowledge Network and you will see. It's a huge infrastructure. Nobody's using it effectively. Universities have gigabit of bandwidth on their doorsteps, but they have not connected their local campus to be able to use it. It took almost 3 years to build that network, and hundreds of capable people worked on it. During planning, we had 60, 70 people committee that looked at the needs of the people. Dr. Chidambaram, who was scientific advisor, helped us a lot. There were many other who participated, and a young team of talented people from Knowledge Commission navigated this along with Dr. Garola, uh, Dr. Sharma, and others at NIC. It is a very powerful tool, and we got to use that now during this education crisis. I don't think anyone has ever talked about using National Knowledge Network in education crisis. Coming from a rural background, what were the challenges you had to face while you grew up? Well, we were not just from rural background, we were poor. Like I said earlier, I had never used telephone until I came to America. Because to have telephone in those days was a luxury. We were too poor to have telephone. If somebody had a telephone, he was too rich to be my friend. So there was no need to call anybody. As poor, we were afraid to go into fancy places. But we had inner confidence. But we didn't have resources. We didn't have all the expensive stuff. So I think there were a lot of challenges, but at the same time, there were a lot of opportunities. Ignorance at times could be a great asset. Coming back to a country where traditional challenge technology at every step, what were the challenges that you had to face and your key takeaway from them? I think I had to make believers out of people. Everywhere I went, people would say, can't be done. Don't try. In India, if you're trying to go north, they'll say go south. If you're going east, they'll say go west. Basically, what they're saying is don't make a movement. If you make a movement, there'll be criticism. And look at it today. If you say something on public television, media would jump at you immediately and say, oh, what about this? What about that? Never gives you enough space of your own to explore new frontiers. Everyone has preconceived ideas as to what is wrong, what is right, what is fair, what is unfair. And they use their yardsticks to judge you. They don't remember your background. They don't appreciate your expertise, but they have an opinion. And I think that was the toughest thing, is to fight ignorance of opinions formulated by people who had no background, who had no capabilities, but they thought they had power, they had wisdom. And it's tough. On one hand, you want to respect them. On the other hand, you can't take their advice because then you'll be derailed. You have a path, you follow that path, and if you listen to them, you'll be derailed. If you don't listen to them, they are unhappy. They start their campaign against you. So you had a lot of resistance to change. People don't like change. People like comfort zone. They're comfortable with what it is. And if you ask them to change, change is unknown. It's fear, uncomfort. But when it gets done, they all want to benefit from it. But that's human nature. It is true all over the world. So I don't think there is an issue of resistance. That's part of life. You have to just go on. Okay. There are so many innovative things to be developed in India today. Coronavirus has shown us that we need to develop our own model of development. I want to go back to Gandhian ideas of decentralization. I want people to focus on every district. The other day I was talking to Shekhar Kapoor on water. He's making this movie called Pani. And I believe that we have disconnected ourselves from rivers, talabs, and wells. When I grew up, this connectivity was critical to every Indian. Your nadi, your talab, and your kuwa. We have disconnected ourselves from that and we have gone into bottled water. Our rivers have no water. Our wells are dry. Our ponds are dirty. Why can't we fix that? You fix that and you'll solve water problems. So we got to go back to basic. Technology is not about satellite software and computers and IoT and artificial intelligence and machine learning software. Technology is also about water, sanitation, education, health. In health, we have a huge traditional health, system. Herbal medicine, we don't use that anymore. We immediately go to fancy doctor and five-star hospital. Can we afford to do that? No. So I think we need Indian solutions, Indian talent, Indian capabilities. That doesn't mean we are disconnecting from globalization. You need globalization and you need localization. But you don't need to ignore your own genetic pool. You got to nurture and grow and strengthen your genetic pool. Whether it is local tomato or local baigan or local teacher or local herbal medicine. You got to blend local capabilities in a very effective way. It's not that simple, believe me. The debate that goes on in India today bothers me a great deal about our future. It is totally rubbish. Pardon me for saying it. But people don't seem to understand the value of democracy, freedom, human rights, truth, trust. People openly lie and get away with it. And apparently, people respect lies. How do you build a nation like that? And we'll have to pay the price somewhere, if not today, tomorrow. There are no shortcuts. Believe me, there are no shortcuts. There is a book written on my life. If you want to look at it, it's called Dreaming Big. I wrote that in 2015 for my granddaughter because someday she's going to grow up and ask, who was this old man who came to America 100 years ago, 70 years ago? What her father tells her is going to be very different from what I have to tell. So I wrote one. If you get a chance, look at it. I hope this gives you some food for thought. Not that I have all the answers, but I believe in Indian talent. I believe in our young people, but I worry about them. When they stay away from the path of truth, trust, love, I worry. I hope you will study some more, take this thing a little seriously, and do your own search, soul searching. Go inside. Don't take what people tell you. Decide what kind of a person you want to be. Do you want to be real, comfortable, honest, sincere, moral human being? Then do that. If you want to be a liar, want to cheat, Want to steal? Maybe that's what you want. That's your choice. You make those choices. And if your soul tells you what is right, believe in it. Go for it. Try it out. Learn from your journey. At the end of the day, it's a journey which has a beginning and it has an end. How do we experience that journey? Is life is all about. Who do you meet with it in the process? Meet with people. How do you react with them? How do they love you, care for you, take care of you? How do you take care of them? Life is not about making money. Believe me, making money is important for living. But at the end of the day, life is about experiences. And my recommendation is go get the best experiences possible. Explore this world. It is a fascinating world. And you are indeed living in best of the best time in human history. Thank you.